My name is Ruth Hollingshead. I live in Carisbrooke on the Isle of Wight, and I'm a trustee for Sight for Wight, the island sight loss charity, and also volunteer there as well. I have been for about 20 years.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So, first of all, can we start by talking about Charles Bonnet syndrome? And can you just explain to any islanders who don't know what that is, what that is?
Okay, Charles Bonnet syndrome. In a sort of very, very layman's term nutshell, it's a bit like sort of phantom limb pain that amputees experience. Your brain tries to make sense of what's missing. So if you experience sort of sudden sight loss or a rapid change in your vision, that's when it usually happens, and your brain is basically trying to put in images that will make sense. So it'll fill in the missing gaps with familiar things, to try and sort of bridge gaps within your sort of visual field. So yeah, in layman's terms, that's basically what it is. I'm sure it's far more complicated, but yes.
Okay, and so the symptoms of this is obviously sort of hallucinations and things like that. There is no cure for this, is that right?
I mean, I am no medical expert. As far as I know, there is no hard and fast cure for it. There have been trials with medication. There have been trials with sort of hypnotherapy and things like that. For most patients, when their vision sort of stabilises, they sort of peter out. Not for everybody. I mean, I've had them for about 35 years now, and I get them probably on a weekly basis. But for the majority of people, they do sort of cease as your vision gets more stable.
And how do you live with it, Ruth? Because you say you get them. Sorry, did you say once a week?
At least once. I mean, I had one this morning.
Okay.
But it's tiny things. I mean, for example, I've got a very, very bright, well-lit kitchen with sort of very, very white work surfaces. I was making a cup of coffee, looking forward. I have no central vision. I just have a sparkly big patch in the middle with constant sort of flashing lights. And I've got very murky, foggy vision in a sort of polo shape around the outside of my peripheral. So I can see a little tiny bit at the very bottom, if you like, of my vision. I was staring straight ahead, making a cup of coffee, and I thought I saw a spider run across the work surface. Now, in reality, it's actually, I could just catch my eyelashes out the corner of my eye, if you like, but my brain changes it into something else. I mean, fortunately, I know it's not, I hope it wasn't a spider. No, I know it's not a spider there. So I can just think, but if I wasn't expecting that or I didn't know what it was, particularly if I had a phobia of spiders, that would have been quite upsetting. I mean, for me, the majority of mine are usually things like I will see steps where there aren't steps. I will see lampposts, and it's caused by shadows on the pavement will turn into something. For example, a bin may turn into a person. It's very, very brief and it's very quick. But I mean, I know my local area, so I know what is real and what isn't real. But if I'm on holiday, for example, or somewhere I don't know, it's a lot more disorientating for me.
It sounds...
I put all my faith in my guide dog and just keep going.
Oh, honestly, Ruth, that's brilliant. I mean, it does sound very scary if you didn't know what it was. I mean, you saying you've had it for 30 years. When did it start for you and how did it start?
I probably didn't realise what it was. The first time I really thought about it, I saw a hooded figure peering over my child's cot. And it was actually the curtains, because I'd just got up, groveled in there, very poor lighting, looked over and saw this hooded figure sort of leaning over the cot. Thought, but yeah, deep breath and turn the light on and think, it's actually the curtains. And I'm thinking, and then it sort of started to make sense a little bit. My brain is changing things into things that aren't there. And I did a bit of more research and sort of realised, found out a bit more about Charles Bonnet. I spoke to my eye specialist who fortunately, was quite up on it and knew what I was talking about, and we discussed it. And it made a lot more sense of sort of things that had happened when I was younger, things that I thought I'd seen. And because my mum had said she'd seen me sometimes, I'd suddenly stop dead, or I'd step to one side to avoid something that wasn't there, and it's because I'd seen something. I see a lot of little dogs running around. It's usually a paper bag or leaves this time of year, but they turn into little dogs or things. But as a volunteer at Sight for Wight, I mean, over the last 20 years, I've come across people who it's had a really traumatic effect, on their lives because they haven't understood what is happening. It's probably the first time they've spoken to anybody about it. Because particularly with eye conditions related to older age, so macular degeneration, sometimes strokes, glaucoma, it does happen later on in life, and people are frightened that it's actually a cognitive impairment, that maybe it's the early stages of dementia. So they keep quiet. They don't want to say anything. They don't want to, who wants to say I'm seeing things that aren't there? So that people do keep quiet. Really pleased it's been brought to the public eye now. People to be a bit more open and be able to discuss it.
What's really interesting, Ruth, what you say, I mean, that's absolutely. I was going to ask you, what was your first thought when you first had the experience? And you've obviously explained about your child's court. I mean, that was that must be absolutely terrifying. And I'm really glad you said that about, other people's experiences and about dementia and stuff, because I read up on that, and there was people often get them confused and, like you say, probably aren't speaking about it and are worried it's something else. I mean, it's really, really interesting. And it sounds pretty scary, actually, to be honest. I mean,
I think the thing is, particularly for a lot of people, because your brain fills in something familiar, for some people, suddenly their dead spouse is sat on the sofa where they've always sat. So obviously that's really upsetting, suddenly, because the brain's filling in the familiar. And some people see really great. I mean, I never see really grotesque things, but sort of gargoyles and goblins and horrible little faces are quite common. I've worked with people in the past who've, for example, woke up thinking their room is on fire. I've worked in the past with people who, I've worked with a lady who was sectioned. We're going back a lot of years now. I've worked with somebody who had electric shock therapy several years ago, decades ago, because it just wasn't understood. And they couldn't explain the sort of physical symptoms. So I'm so pleased. I mean, I don't watch Coronation Street, but soap operas have their place in bringing these sorts of things really to the public eye, and so people can discuss it and hopefully make a bit more sense of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ruth, if you mind me asking, how did you lose your sight?
I have a genetic condition. It's called rod-cone dystrophy. So my sight started to deteriorate when I was probably about 8 or 9, and it was a slow deterioration over my teenage years. It started off with a central vision going. It's now impacting my peripheral vision. I've got about between 3 and 5% functional vision, but I was registered as, it's now SSI, as blind in 1998. And even now I can make out blurry objects, which probably is why I experience Charles-Bonnet syndrome more so, is because I have because of the flashing lights and the flickering lights in my vision, it's never constant. So therefore I haven't got that stability that usually brings an end to the condition. And I say not always, some people will have it forever, but it is quite uncommon. It usually sort of does stabilise and stop.
That's really interesting. So, Ruth, what is your message to Islanders then?
My message to Islanders would be, if you are experiencing hallucinations, or you have suspicions that you're seeing things that aren't there, talk to somebody, talk to your GP, give Sight for Wight a call. We can signpost you on. There's a fantastic organisation called Esme's Umbrella, run by a lady called Judith Potts, and she's worked very closely with the team at Granada, talking about Charles-Bonnet syndrome. And so call Sight for Wight and we can direct you on to other services. We'll be able to help you, but definitely talk about it.
Brilliant, Ruth. And is there anything else that you would like to mention?
I was just going to say, very often people live with their sight loss quite happily in their own home. It's a change in their circumstances. So, for example, if suddenly somebody moves to sheltered accommodation, or they move house, go into care home or assisted living, their familiar surroundings are gone, and that can be another trigger for their brain is trying to make sense of their surroundings, because up until now it's just been filling in what it knows is there, and suddenly it can't do that anymore. So that could be another trigger for people who maybe have elderly relatives who are moving into sheltered accommodation or a care home. They suddenly maybe have these hallucinations where they've never had them before. So it's all these different things just to watch out for.